What are we going to talk about today? Specialty handgun loads. When maybe it's not the right choice to carry hollow point ammunition. Kind of the go-to for handguns. But it's not always the right answer. Or maybe not always the best answer. Because there's often not a right answer. Maybe it's better to look at that as a sliding scale of effective versus ineffective. So specialty or other than hollow point ammunition is what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life. Hello gunfighters, and welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting and gun-related stuff the right way with God at the center. So I think I'm going to forego the lengthy bio. Try to abbreviate it. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Milito, and I am blessed to serve you today. I'm going to come at this episode from the perspective that 9mm is the go-to defensive caliber and that hollow point expanding ammunition of a good, reliable, proven design is the go-to defensive option. That being said, there are some other applications when you might not want hollow point ammunition. I'm going to stick to handguns for this. I thought about doing handgun, rifle, and shotgun, but it may get rather lengthy. So when specialty loads for 9mm may be called for, or other than hollow point, because some of these aren't really that special. So let's get into it. First of all, not everybody carries a 9mm because of recoil, because of, they just want to carry a lot of ammo, whatever the case might be. Perhaps in some handguns, some people are carrying 22 long rifle. Well, depending on you and your handgun and your barrel length and the feeding geometry in said handgun, you may decide that you want just copper-plated or straight old-school lead round-nosed bullets in your 22 because it's a marginal caliber, right? It's a lot smaller and less powerful than 9mm. And penetration can be important. So a 22, if you're carrying that for defense, you may look at just a straight lead projectile or a copper washed, because they generally don't have like a copper jacket. It's usually just some kind of copper wash. You may look at that as your go-to carry load, defensive load for your 22 caliber handgun. Also, there are some other calibers, 25 ACP, which you might argue is less effective than 22 long rifle. It's not around a lot anymore, but 25 ACP, I would definitely see a good case for carrying ball ammo, full metal jacket ammo, because it's really a marginal caliber, and penetration is important. And if that projectile expands, it may not penetrate far enough. So I would give up the expansion in that category for the deep penetration. Also, the 32, you're getting there where I would still probably choose a straight ball full metal jacket round if I'm talking 32 ACP. Now when you get into 380, 380's come a long way in, like, let's say the past decade. Depending on you and barrel length, you may decide you still want to carry full metal jacket, and I would say it wouldn't be the worst choice. Now there are some really good go-to defensive loads in 380, but that really depends on you and your barrel length and what you want. You may decide that is a little too marginal on penetration and you want to go with a full metal jacket round. Now, moving up to 9mm, kind of the standard go-to defensive handgun caliber, and I think for good reason. Yes, I think the vast majority of the time go with a good proven design, and I did an entire episode on go-to 9mm loads. But real quickly and succinctly, a good street proven that's been around a while, not some new high velocity crazy construction thing, but a good proven with street cred round. whether that's Federal 9B PLE or Spear Gold Dot, pretty much any of their grains, or Winchester Ranger T147, Spear G2, any of the good proven loads, go with one of those, but there are times when not to. I'm a big fan, if you've listened for any length of time, of the baby bug out bag, the bailout bag. And I think in there it makes a lot of sense to have a full-size fighting handgun. Now, most of the time, I carry a full-size fighting handgun, ADC. I know a lot of people don't, and sometimes I don't. I'd like to have access to a full-size fighting handgun in a small carryable bag where if I'm going somewhere with my wife and we're taking her car and I'm, let's say, not carrying a full-size fighting handgun that day, I still have access to one in a system that I could put on and use. That being said, it's kind of one of my go-to vehicle guns. Now, I also have long guns for truck guns, for vehicle guns, but in this guise, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a magazine of Full Metal Jacket ammo. Why? Because it's reasonable to assume if I'm in a vehicle, I may have to fight from a vehicle, out of a vehicle. I may have to shoot through a vehicle, either shooting out of my vehicle and or into the adversary's vehicle. For that, penetration is nice. And I'll forgo expansion on that for penetration. In those cases, you might see an advantage to not have it as your go-to loaded ammo, but perhaps a magazine of that in case you find yourself in that situation. They are known for penetration, and that might be a situation where penetration is going to trump expansion. Also, another one, legality. Now, I don't know where you are, but there are some jurisdictions where you cannot or aren't supposed to have hollow point or expanding ammunition, however they word that. So you may be in that situation anyway. You may have to have a non-hollow point round as your defensive load. There are a couple of options there. One that's actually pretty proven and a decent round, I'm looking at one in front of me now, and that is the Federal Guard Dog. By definition, it is not a hollow point. It's designed very differently from a lot of other hollow points in that it's not a hollow point at all. It's got a flat front. It mostly looks like a silver flat pointed bullet. But the inside is got I'm going to say rubber. It's probably some kind of different thing, but a rubbery substance inside. And when it hits the front, instead of mushrooming and expanding out like a flower, it squishes down and pushes the middle out, if you can imagine that. And the middle gets wider, so it does expand, although it's not a hollow point. And they've been around a while, and they seem to do fairly well. So that is an option. Just know they're fairly light for caliber. I believe in 9mm, they're 105 grain. And you're going to find them, I think, light for caliber throughout the spectrum of defensive handgun rounds. So you're probably going to get less penetration, but that may not matter to you. If you're in a jurisdiction where you can't have hollow point expanding ammo, that might be a good choice. Also, if you're limited to just FMJ ammo, know that not all Full Metal Jacket is created equal. Not all bullet profiles are equal. You'd be surprised at what different bullet profiles can do. For a long time, for example, before there were reliably expanding hollow points, the go-to was kind of wad cutters or semi-wad cutters because they were known for doing more damage than a round-nose bullet. So you may, for whatever reason, decide you want to go with wad cutter or semi-wad cutter ammo, especially hard-cast semi-wad cutters. A good example of this would be if you carry a 357 and you want it to pull dual purpose as bear defense or something like it. Not only in general do not round-nose bullets, but wad cutters, semi-wad cutters, truncated cones, those kind of bullets do more tissue damage. They also tend to penetrate better. You can go look that up and verify that for yourself, but I do believe that that is the case. It would seem the opposite because a round nose would seem like it would go further, but for whatever reason it seems that flat-pointed bullets of truncated cone design or just flat point or wad cutter, semi-wad cutters, especially semi-wad cutters like a hard-cast semi-wad cutter, are known for deep penetration. Just for some reason, round-nose bullets tend to veer off course and and not stay as true on course through dense media as these flat-nosed bullets do. So just know that all full metal jacket bullets are not created equal. So you may decide to go with that. Perhaps the only gun you have is an older gun that was designed in an era when hollow point ammunition is not or was not really a thing, right? We think of hollow points now as being everywhere, but they're not that old. You're going back a couple of decades and they weren't that common. So a lot of really good guns that are around maybe weren't designed for those and don't feed those well. Maybe that's what you have. So maybe you want to look for a round-nosed bullet because that's what feeds, and you'd rather have a gun that feeds and is reliable with round-nosed bullets than a gun that doesn't feed at all with hollow point bullets. Maybe an old GI 1911 is what you have for a home defense gun. Now, thus far, we've talked a lot about more penetration. What about when you specifically want less penetration? As you might surmise from my background, I've done quite a bit of CQB and stuff like that. When you're working in a shoot house, frangible ammunition is desired. Frangible ammo, where you want that pistol round when you shoot a target inside a room to dissipate all its energy. Frangible ammo, so you might want it for training. Right? Frangible ammo exists for a reason. You might want it to shoot specific targets at close range. Now you got to verify what's safe and unsafe for you, but you might be able to shoot steel targets with frangible at a closer distance, and you'd be comfortable shooting just regular full metal jacket ammo at the same target. Also, handgun hunting. I love handgun hunting. I also really love handgun hunting with my carry gun because I want to be good with my carry gun. At the time of this recording, I don't own a big bore revolver because I'm not going to carry it day to day. Just in the environment that I'm in, it wouldn't be a wise choice. So I'm not going to hunt with it. But I've taken many animals, including deer-sized game, more than I can honestly remember, with a handgun. Now, if you're talking large game like that, yeah, you want a good balance of penetration and expansion, much like on a human target. However, I don't always hunt big game. I also like to hunt other things. What about varmint hunting with a handgun? What about squirrels, rabbits, prairie dogs, coyotes? Right, where you don't need that expansion. Talk about a darn effective varmint round. Frangible bullets are crazy effective. So if you just wanted to get rid of some varmints where it's legal that carry the bubonic plague, yes, that's a real thing, prairie dogs. You just wanted to play a really tactical version of whack-a-mole where varmint pops up, you shoot it. And you don't want the animal to suffer, but you want it to be, let's just say, instantly not alive. Frangible bullets, right? They have application there. So frangible bullets, there's a time when you might want less penetration. And there's this banter that's I've heard for decades, over penetration. Listen, any handgun round, until they invent some kind of new crazy technology, any good reliable handgun round that's going to penetrate deep enough to, let's say, reliably change an adversary's behavior is also going to penetrate some drywall, right? There's no cheating physics. So worry about problem number one first, and that's if somebody's trying to kill you or somebody else, change their behavior with the most effective tool. And that's all I really want to get into on that. I wouldn't recommend you carry frangible ammo as your go-to defensive ammo against people. Zombie chipmunks, maybe a good choice. The older patrons will get that. I did a Patreon-only episode a long time ago of guns for the zombie apocalypse. But in all seriousness, from a serious gunfighting perspective, again, your go-to, I think, should be, if you can, a good, expanding, hollow point ammunition for your fighting handgun. That's known to be reliable by you and shoots point of aim, point of impact by you. Don't make the mistake of training with a 115 grain ball and then just loading up 135 grain plus P and just expecting it to hit where you shoot. It may not. Don't trust your life to something unproven. But I think good, proven, hollow point defensive ammunition is a standard for a reason. It's a little bit off topic, but I didn't want you to think I was advocating you to go and load up your, Glock 19 with frangible ammo and carry it for defense. I do not advocate that. Also, some unconventional stuff. How about the 5.7? Now, the 5.7 is this quasi PDW round, but I think it's more popular today in handguns than PDWs. I could be wrong, but I think it probably is. Now, that said, a lot of the ammunition for the 5.7 by 28 is actually more like rifle ammo. So there's a case right there why you might not want hollow point, because the most readily available rounds for that gun are not hollow point. Other specialty ammo, and here in the US, it for just the average concealed carrier with no other special caveats in general, armor piercing ammunition is prohibited. So I'm not going to get into that. There would be some really good real-world application, like stopping an active shooter with body armor, where you might want that, but it's prohibited. So it being malum prohibitum, let's go around that, steer around. If you start getting into higher velocity rounds, like 357 Magnum, 357 SIG, you may decide that, hollow point, or ballistic engineers may decide that for the best balance in those, you don't want a hollow point because it'll give too rapid expansion, because it's always this balancing act, right, between enough penetration and good expansion. For every bit that the bullet expands, it reduces its ability to penetrate because it's getting wider. So it takes more energy to push it through a given media. Hopefully that makes sense in an audio format. That's why hollow points don't penetrate in general as deeply if they expand, because when that object expands, it reduces its ability to penetrate, and that's a balancing act. You may get to a point like a 357 Magnum or a 44 Magnum or something like that with higher velocities where the hollow point would give too rapid of expansion, so you want to balance it. One of the old go-to ways to do that was a semi-jacketed soft point, meaning it wasn't a full metal jacket. The metal jacket did not go all the way to the top, but there was rather an exposed lead top that at those higher velocities would give a good balance of penetration and expansion. A classic one of this would be 158 grain semi-jacketed 357 Magnum ammo. Got a good reputation for, let's say, medium game hunting. And if you wanted a good dual purpose for that, you might go medium game harvesting or defense from bear, but you also wanted it for defense against people, because people behave badly in national parks and in the wilderness as well. Something like that might be your go-to load. Now let's talk about another kind of ammo, and I'm not getting off on the tangents of the new hot frangible sawtooth ammos or whatever. I'm going to call these, because they're not as trivial or as Johnny-come-lately as a lot of these other rounds. I'm going to call them the screwdriver rounds. You probably know what I'm talking about. The rounds that look like a Phillips head screwdriver. The idea behind these is bullets have rifling spins. These grooves kind of go in and do damage to tissue without the bullet actually deforming or expanding at all. Now, if it hit a bone or something, it may deform or expand. But in general, they're designed to keep their shape, and the spinning action is what imparts damage to tissue. These are not just a flash in the pan. They've been around a while now. Again, I'm not saying you should load up your Glock 19 with these and have this as your go-to carry ammo, but they are a real option. Again, let's say that the jurisdiction you're in prohibited expanding ammo, so you couldn't carry the guard dogs or full metal jacket. These are not full metal jacket ammo. I'm not sure where these would or wouldn't be legal, but for that reason. Also, again, going back to the marginal calibers, I would see a lot better case for carrying this in a 380 than I would a 9mm, because there's so many great defensive loads in 9mm. But if you were thinking, I want a little bit more penetration than some of these hollow points offer, you might look at a round like this in 380. And I'm not telling you to. I'm telling you to do your own due diligence. You should not just, Gunfighter Life said this and go load your gun up with that. You have to do your due diligence. Do not be a beta tester in a gunfight. But you might see it as a valid option. But these do exist, these screwdriver rounds. Some are solid copper. I've seen some made out of like a copper polymer, call it vulcanization, where they bind it together. I don't even know what the proper vernacular would be, but it's a vulcanization, it's the word I'm going to use, where they join these two things together. It's like a copper polymer compound. There's rounds like that are pretty light for caliber, but again, they're not expanding. So look into them for yourself. They're not just a flash in the pan. They've been around a while now. I haven't seen any like large police departments or any real big government agencies that I'm aware of adopt them, and that should say something. Although a lot of times military and law enforcement are kind of slow to the party to adopt new technology. Again, they've been around for a while, so maybe they're worth looking into. I'm not saying they're a better choice than hollow point proven defensive loads, but there may be many circumstances, as we've talked about, where maybe you choose something different. And I like nerding out over ballistic stuff. I really do, as you might imagine, as the host of Gunfighter Life. But I'll tell you this to put it in perspective. I will take a gunfighter. A true gunfighter, I think, is hard to find. But a true gunfighter that can cold and on demand with his carry equipment execute a Mozambique drill at varying distances. I'll take that guy with a gun loaded with full metal jacket over the guy with the latest and greatest gun and the coolest hollow point expanding defensive ammunition. He's never actually tested out of that gun. And I mean shot and make sure it shoots point of aim, point of impact. Absolutely pay attention, and it is critical what kind of ammunition you carry in your gun, but solve problem number one first. And problem number one is hitting your target. Being able to access your gun and getting shots on target quickly and hitting that target. You have to be able to do that before you can worry about what your bullet does when it gets there, because you have to get it there. Anyway, with that, I'm going to start wrapping it up here. I want to remind you, but mostly I want you to consider becoming a patron because you like and want to support this show. Talk about supporting Americans, supporting small business, veteran-owned small business. How's employee numbers 1? This is a American small veteran-owned and run business. So if you want to support that, if you want to support the message, if you want and think this knowledge is valuable, because you gave it some of your time, and I think time's a much more precious resource, perhaps you'll consider supporting. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. With that, the tactical tip of the day and the tactical verse of the day. If you're out there training, dry firing like you should, often mags get dirty. And some mags are a lot easier to disassemble and clean than others. Glocks are notoriously hard to disassemble and clean. And yes, Glock mags get dirty, and yes, you should clean them periodically, especially if you're doing gunfighting stuff with them, dropping them in sand and stuff like that. They're so notoriously hard to clean that I've even seen like specialty things to remove the base plate on there. Anyway, a real quick, easy way to clean a lot of magazines is brake cleaner. They make different kinds of brake cleaner. You might look at the kind that's safe for electronics, like electronic cleaner. You spray it in. That stuff can be really good and a quick, effective way to clean magazines. And it's not that expensive. You could buy gun scrubber or something like it, but gun scrubber is quite a bit more expensive. I would say be careful on finishes and stuff, but usually mags, you don't have to worry about that. If you are, I guess get the gun scrubber or one of those similar brands. But the brake cleaner, electronic cleaner, stuff like that, where you're spraying it in there and the liquid carries the dirt, debris out and then rapidly evaporates and dries. That can be a great way to clean magazines, especially hard to clean ones, again, like Glock, Ruger 1022 mags. It's a great thing to use on that for a quick clean on magazines. That's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. If you're into carrying a gun and defending those weaker than you, I would hope that you're also into justice. Let me read a little bit from Leviticus 19. Do not steal. Do not lie. Do not deceive one another. Do not swear falsely by my name, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Do not hold back the wages of a hired worker overnight. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind, but fear your God. I am the Lord. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. Do not go about spreading slander among your people. Do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. I am the Lord. Do not hate a fellow Israelite in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in their guilt. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Keep my decrees. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.